Hey guys, welcome to another installment of Dorian Gray. Today we're going to be focusing on chapters 3 through 5, and the main topic of discussion is going to be on Oscar Wilde's view of love, as well as how we see that portrayed in Lord Henry, as well as Dorian and Sybil Vane. So first off, let's focus on chapter 3. What we see is Lord Henry finds a particular interest in Dorian continuing to grow. He mentions that they continue to get together, to converse, and then he asks Mr. Erskine about the family heritage of Dorian. What we find out is that Dorian's heritage involves being orphaned from his parents in a mysterious death, possibly done by the father of the mother. What that means is Dorian's father may or may not have been murdered by someone that Dorian's grandfather on his mother's side had hired. Why is that significant? First, that puts us in the literary genre of Gothic literature. Generally, the protagonist in some way has some mysterious romantic death, whether that be through family lineage or whether that be through he himself. We find that Dorian, as a protagonist of this novel, has a dark history, dark past, whether he knows it or not. There's that element of mystery, of murder, and this romantic love. So as we continue, we end the chapter with Lord Henry coming up with this idea of I, in quotes, want to dominate him. What that means is he wants to take control of him emotionally and philosophically. What we see here is Lord Henry is not really focused on the life of Dorian, but rather acting out his philosophical experiments on the medium of a human. How does this relate to the overall themes that we've been looking with? Well, first, what we see here is that he does not necessarily view this as ethical or unethical. It's rather human, just like any other medium, can be manipulated in a way to flesh out philosophical ideas. This would further the idea of art being art. Rather, there is no unethical or ethical anything. Rather, we can show artistic expression through any medium, and it's no longer an ethical question. In the same way, Lord Henry sees Dorian as this artistic medium in which he will manipulate situations and manipulate philosophy in order to understand a concept, and whether that be through human medium or not, there's no ethical questions involved here. This would have been the same view of Oscar Wilde himself. He didn't believe in art being either ethical or unethical, but rather a way to express oneself. So as we continue through this novel, we want to keep that in mind. What does Lord Henry do in certain circumstances, and how does he influence Dorian in any sort of way? Then we have this break in the chapter between chapters 3 and 4. It says the book starts out with saying, there has been a month gap. What we can assume here is that Dorian had been meeting with Lord Henry on a fairly frequent basis to converse about philosophy. We are left in chapter 3 understanding that Lord Henry and Dorian are building a more closely knit relationship. If it seems oddly homoerotic in a certain way, it's because it is. Women are not seen very valued in this story, nor in necessarily the mentality of the time or Oscar Wilde's own personal opinion. So if the romantic relationships seem to be on the masculine side, it's because that's exactly what's going on here. Rather, the intimacy is seen through the influence of men, and women are almost there, as we will find out in this chapter, according to Lord Henry's views, as a decorative sex. So, how do we see that? We see that first in Dorian's interactions with Lady Wotton, or Henry's wife. She seems almost very flighty, not really concerned with anything except for her social status and the music, romantic side of music. When asked, oh, what were they talking about by Henry, she goes, oh, we had the same opinion. Oh, actually, we had rather different opinions. It's of no consequence. And then she's gone and saying, well, I'll see you at some point. Which, first, let's talk about how that helps us understand the relational structure of Lord Henry and his wife. They don't seem to have a very romantic relationship. There is no intimacy there. It's rather them being in a coexisting space rather than anything else. He provides for her, as we can tell, with where they are living, but other than that, there is no romantic interest, there is no intellectual stimulation, there's no intimacy there in any sort of way. It's simply women being there because they're supposed to. He mentions that men get married because they're tired, and women get married because they're curious, and both are disappointed. What does that tell us about the understanding of marriage in this situation? Is that it's not a romantic situation. It's almost, one could say it's a social agreement of society. We see that in chapter 3 with the round discussion of the American women and how they are discussing, well, what does an American woman have to offer an Englishman, and why aren't the Englishmen interested in English women? And, well, is he of some wealth, dry goods stores of this American woman that is getting married, or is he, what significance does the family bring to the society? So romantic relationships aren't necessarily seen at all in this narrative at this certain point, but there is a romantic intimacy with men. Maybe that has something to do with Oscar Wilde, or maybe it is a commentary on the role of women in the society at this point. We then continue to see Dorian talk about this new love of his, Sybil Vane. What's interesting to note is that he met her through the this second-rate theater that he just happened to stumble upon and visit. He said it was a horrible experience. However, this girl just above the age of 17, so she's a young girl, and impressed him and captivated him. And when asked if he wanted to meet her, said of course not, and was so captivated by her character as opposed to who she actually was. He mentioned, of course I don't want to see her, she's been dead for 500 years, implying that he doesn't necessarily see the actress, but rather is so captivated by how she plays the role of Juliet. This is that he then goes a second and a third time, and by the third time he goes, yes, I'll meet the actress. Yet what we notice is that they don't really have a conversation. We don't see their conversation. We can assume something was said, but what we notice is that they don't really know each other other than who they are presenting to be. So Henry asks, okay, well, who is this girl? And he doesn't really give any detail except her role in the plays. We can see that as a superficiality. Because then Lord Henry goes, well, it's your first love. And he goes, no, it's my only love. And then Lord Henry goes, well, there's going to be multiple different loves. The faithful have a boring idea of love, but rather true love is to have a variety of different lovers. And as we know with Lord Henry's influence on Dorian, we'll see whether that happens to be true or not, and how that relates to this idea of marriage, love, faithfulness, and the ethics of it all. Because remember, Lord Henry is operating through an aesthetic and hedonistic worldview. What he's showing here is that no, true love is to be intoxicated by love itself, and that to pursue one's own personal pleasure is to pursue any form of love you can get, which is then being in love with love. We then also see an aesthetic interest here when the only thing that Dorian knows about the girl is that she's an actress, that she can sing very well, and that she's beautiful. That shows us that this is not necessarily a much significant intimate relationship as it is lustful desire to pursue one's pleasure. Although he claims that he's going to be in love with her forever, we see this odd taint to that, where he doesn't know her at all. What's interesting and almost comedic at the end of the chapter is that Lord Henry is contemplating what to do with Dorian, how to involve himself, how to influence him. And he goes to his house and sees a telegram that says that Dorian is engaged with Sybil within 3 interactions, possibly 4 if you want to say that he proposed on this 4th interaction. So that's where we leave off with the Dorian side. So we see this rush of innocence, in a way, Dorian being engaged after 4 interactions, not really knowing her, so it seems a little off. Now let's see on the Sybil side. So we are introduced to this character and her mother, and then eventually her brother. And she is completely fallen in love and intoxicated by the interactions with Dorian. We see that she can only talk about how she's going to get married and he's going to provide wealth for her family and all these other sort of flighty things that you can see in a hopeless romantic relationship of a child. And that's what's really trying to highlight here, is that there's this innocence of Sybil, where she is still seeing this fairy tale of love and is trying to convince her mother and her brother that no, I love him and we're going to be married and it's going to be great. She calls him Prince Charming. Why is that? Well, there's twofold meanings to that. First is that the most obvious, she doesn't know his name. She's become engaged and doesn't know his name, although Dorian knows hers. We can try to figure out why does he know hers, maybe through a playbill or through one of the patrons of the theater, but she doesn't know his name. That's the first obvious thing why she calls him Prince Charming. And second, to show that fairy tale mentality of the young, to show how the innocent are susceptible to these dangerous worldviews such as hedonism and aestheticism because they don't know better and they're caught into this fairy tale. What we then see is James Vane, Sybil's sister, or brother rather, being one of the more rational characters. He asks, who is he? Why is he interested in you? Talks to his mother and goes, okay, you say he's a gentleman, but wasn't the man who impregnated you and left you and died a gentleman also? So we see the skeptical side and the rational side of James Vane, and eventually we see a threat be made. If he hurts you, I'm going to kill him. So now we go more into this Gothic literature genre of mystery, death, romantic tragedy, and this overlooming threat from James of whatever happens, if he hurts you, I'm going to kill him. And on the other side, we have the influence of Lord Henry on Dorian saying, oh, but it's just one love, it's supposed to be temporary. So that leaves us on a cliffhanger. What is Dorian going to do? Will he be influenced by Lord Henry? Or will he get rid of that mentality and love Sybil? That's where it leaves us off today. What I want you to really pay attention to is the idea of love in these chapters. What are the commentaries of different characters, as well as how does Lord Henry's philosophy of hedonism and aestheticism influence this idea of love, especially on young, innocent, malleable characters, as well as the ethics and the mentality behind human beings being the medium in which we can explore artistic expression. With that, I hope you have a great week, and I'll see you guys next week.